Hello and welcome to Business 7. I'm Jo Marie Duddy. With me, Philippus Usiku, my colleague on the financial desk at MarketWatch and Business 7 at Namibia Media Holdings. Hello, Philip. Are you excited for the program?
Very excited.
Very excited, so am I. It's jam-packed. Please stay tuned.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.
Let's start with the latest news. Philip, you attended a press conference yesterday by Finance Minister Ipumbushimi. Long-awaited news regarding procurement. Was it interesting?
Interesting, great news for local firms in terms of empowerment.
Fantastic. Well, let's first take a look at what Minister Shimi had to say.
One of the objectives of the code is to empower local suppliers. So in other words, if you have a tender which is open for international competition, in other words, international suppliers are also eligible to participate in the tender, and local companies are also eligible to participate in that tender, preference should be given to a local company, a local supplier. Again, the rationale, the local supplier is here, it creates jobs, it pays tax, and therefore it's important to empower local suppliers and help them to grow, because we also want to see sustainable businesses in Namibia that are going to expand, create more employment, but also export things outside so that they can earn foreign exchange. So competition between an international supplier and a local supplier, preference should be given to a local supplier. But of course, there is a price limit. Yeah. So the only flexibility that has been allowed in terms of the code is that the difference in price should not be more than 10%. Preferably should be less than 10%, but 10% is how far we can go. So if you're above 10%, it means you're not a competitive entity, and therefore you should not be given preference, because you will be wasting taxpayers' money. Yeah, okay, that's with regard to international tenders. In other words, tenders that are open for international bidders to also participate, both international and local bidders. For those that are exclusive for local suppliers, let's say you have 3 or 4 local suppliers. Again, you will then have to look at the code to see if this local supplier, a real bona fide local supplier that is producing goods here. That's one. Is this local supplier having the capability to supply quality goods or service? That's 2. Is this local supplier an SME or a company that is maybe both SME but is also owned by a woman? So all those are things that are going to add up. Now, once you have selected, you then have to look at, if you have 2 that are meeting all the criteria, the one that is most responsive. And what is most responsive? In other words, it's able, in your judgment, as the evaluation committee or the entity that is procuring, that is able to produce or to deliver quality goods, but also it must be cost effective. In other words, if the quality is the same, there's a price difference, you have to give it to the one that gives you back the best value for money. That's
Philip, you attended the conference, you also took the video, thank you very much. Were there a lot of journalists?
Not as expected. In fact, they were disappointed. But it was not packed as usual, but it was great news. It was really great news for local firms.
Indeed, because procurement, the issue of procurement has been a real hot potato in Namibia for the last couple of years. Do you think what Minister Shimi had to say and the new plans, do you think that will address the controversy?
Yes, I think it's a move in the right direction because the policy really it aims to empower local firms, obviously to give them preference in terms of awarding them tenders. So I think it's really a step into the right direction because to put it in context, we need to remember that government is one of the largest spender of goods and services, and expenditure is estimated between 20 to 30%. So if local firms are given preference, those funds will stay in the country. They will create employment opportunities. They will be paying taxes. And also, they will be involved in production activities, and they will be able to supply the local market and also export the surplus, which is good for foreign exchange.
Spoken like a true economist. Thank you for those insights, Philip. Also, of course, besides everything else that you've mentioned, the spillover effect of money being spent at businesses and at workers, that will also then feed back into the economy because of purchasing power, etc.
Yes, that's correct, Joe. Because if local firms are empowered, the creation of employment activities is very vital. You know, unemployment is very high at the moment. So those salaries that will be paid to people will make a significant impact to their private lives and also the economy, because they will be able to stimulate the economy through spending.
And very much a stimulus very much needed. We've seen from the stats of the Namibia Statistics Agency that wholesale and retail, one of the pillars of the economy, still under tremendous pressure.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So yeah, it's very important that we develop industries locally because it has a lot of spillover effects in terms of production, which will contribute positively to the gross domestic product of the country, and yeah, it's as well as employment. So I feel it's really a good move.
Fantastic. Great news of a little green shoot so very early in the year for the economy. Let's hope that bears fruit. Thank you very much for your insights, Philip. We'll be right back.
Every day, you make choices that make you legendary. Journey together with us on the path to securing your legacy as a member of the League of Legends. With the Select Platinum Bundle Fee Premium Bank offering, you will access tools that will enable you to thrive. If you earn 850,000 Namibian dollars per annum or more, you can apply for this offering today via bankvinted.com.na for only 447 Namibian dollars per month. Bank Vinted, a member of Capricorn Group.
Let's turn to the region for a bit. We've got a very interesting report found from Reuters about dollars being fixed, worn dollars being fixed in Zimbabwe. Philip, we know that Zimbabwe has great potential but has been suffering for decades. So just out of curiosity, have you been to Zimbabwe?
No, not yet.
You should go. I lived in Zimbabwe for 2 years, many years ago, and yes, the country's got great potential. It's a beautiful place to visit. It is indeed one of the gems of Southern Africa. But let's listen to David Doyle, who filed this report for Reuters.
A dab of glue and this $10 note is as good as new. So says black market trader Cuthbert Goodser as he sits patching up currency in Zimbabwe's capital Harare.
I'm a potato seller, but I saw buying torn US dollar notes as another business opportunity.
Zimbabwe is a dual currency economy following the collapse of the Zimbabwean dollar in 2009. Zim dollars were reintroduced in 2019, but locals generally rely on the greenback for daily transactions. However, with US currency in short supply, grimy old notes are making a comeback. Goodzer buys well-worn cash that he says would be rejected at supermarkets at a discount. He then fixes it up and sells it for profit on the black market.
When a person brings their torn dollars, I pay 600 Zim dollars for every dollar. I will sell them and get 800 Zim dollars. There are others who do not want money. We give them what we sell: bananas, oranges, apples, or potatoes. I gain at least 20 or 30 cents per dollar.
Zimbabwean banks are mandated to accept soiled money in exchange for crisp notes. The central bank has asked citizens to make that exchange using official channels. But, having lost their savings to hyperinflation, many mistrust the financial system and prefer black market traders. Whilst not as severe as the crisis under former President Robert Mugabe, Zimbabwe's economy is again struggling. Inflation is in the triple digits, unemployment is high, and the local currency has been sliding. For those like Goodzer, breathing new life into old dollars is just one way to survive amid the financial onslaught.
Let's become local once again. Philip, earlier this week, you wrote a very interesting story about the oil price, the EU ban, the upcoming G7 meeting, etc. Just quickly recap that for us.
Yes, it's obviously for us, for now, it's good news. The Ministry of Mines and Energy just announced that fuel prices will remain unchanged for the month of February. However, they have warned that there are a lot of uncertainties. Firstly, it's the reopening of the China's economy. We all know that China is one of the largest economies in the world, so they do expect that the demand in oil will increase, and obviously that might cause some distraction in the market, because when demand is high, suppliers take advantage of the situation, and
so
then they hike the price.
Yes.
But also we have had reports that as from the 5th of February, the European Union and the G7 countries intend on imposing a price cap on oil on Russian oil exports. So analysts are of the view that obviously this will shake the market in a certain way, because for me there are two things involved. Will Russia be willing to export oil at the price that will be demanded by those countries? And obviously it's a way of punishing them for the Ukraine invasion, and also to reduce their revenue. However, this could also be an opportunity for emerging countries to say, since the EU has set a price cap for oil, how about we negotiate with you, so even if we don't buy it at that price, let's say for argument's sake, they are saying they are going to buy a barrel for $60. So emerging markets can say, how about we give you 80, for example, so they don't. So it's an opportunity really, and the U.S. Treasury Janet Yellen has been urging African countries really to take the price cap as an incentive to negotiate for steeper discounts on oil.
Yes, very much important there that African countries stand together as a unity and exert their bargaining power. Interesting, you mentioned just now the good news that fuel prices in Namibia will remain the same in February this month. Of course, fuel price, petrol price, currently still 17% more expensive than it was a year ago, while the diesel price is 33% higher. So still, we're going to need a lot of relief to come back to where we were last year. But also, bad news from South Africa in terms of the fuel price.
Yes, it's bad news for South Africa. Prices in South Africa are expected to increase. If you have to compare South Africa's prices to Namibia, they are already relatively high. So news from South Africa that fuel prices are going to increase is just bad news for African motorists, and this is such a very important commodity in the economy. I mean, everyone depends on fuel in one way or the other, so bad news for South Africa.
Indeed, and also bad news for us because we import a tremendous amount of products from South Africa. So if the price goes up there, that will flow through to Namibia in terms of inflation, because inevitably companies or suppliers will have to pay more for products here, and they'll pass it on to the consumer.
That's very true, because it's an input in their operation costs. So if they used to spend a certain amount on fuel to deliver certain goods in a certain country, with the hike, obviously we can expect that goods that we import from that country is likely to increase as well. So bad news for South Africa, but bad news for Namibia as well.
Hang in there. 2023 still going to be quite a tough year from the looks of it. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Thank you so much to FNB for this opportunity. Thank you so much to FNB. What an experience. I never got to do shopping in 5 minutes, but look at all this.
Philip, what's next on our agenda?
Yeah, let's look at the top 5 stories that made headlines in the region.
Yes, our report, as we do it weekly, is supplied by Reuters.
Here are 5 business stories making headlines in sub-Saharan Africa this week. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has lauded Ford's 100-year history of assembling vehicles in South Africa. Yellen was visiting the country this week as part of a diplomatic charm offensive aimed at deepening US economic ties and countering China.
Africa will shape the future of the global economy.
Yellen was earlier in Zambia at the same time as International Monetary Fund Chief Kristalina Georgieva. Both have been frustrated at delays in securing debt relief for Zambia, which defaulted on its sovereign debt in 2020. Georgieva said the IMF had reached an agreement in principle with China, Zambia's biggest bilateral creditor, about a debt restructuring strategy. Police blocked Ugandan opposition leader Kizza Besigye from attending a discussion on the risks of the country's oil ambitions on Tuesday.
There is no doubt that countries that have exploited oil, when their governance is poor, that oil has become a curse.
It was the same day that Uganda commissioned the first of 4 oil rigs, as it aims for its first output in 2025. Prosus and its South African parent Naspers are cutting up to 30% of jobs at their corporate offices, the Dutch technology investor said on Wednesday. The companies, whose largest offices are in Johannesburg and Amsterdam, are the latest major technology-based firms to make layoffs, after Google parent Alphabet announced big cuts last week. And finally, Nigeria's central bank on Thursday launched a domestic card scheme to rival the likes of MasterCard and Visa. The move is aimed at enhancing its drive to make Africa's biggest economy a cashless society and save the country foreign transaction fees.
Let's move over to South Africa. Philip, Eskom daily in the news, not just in South Africa, worldwide.
Yes, it's bad news for South Africa. And we have had the World Bank and IMF slashing their growth prospects for the year ahead. And it's bad news for South Africa and bad news for us as well. Like we said before, we highly depend on South Africa. So, yeah.
Very much so. And interestingly enough, we had guests from Johannesburg visiting us last week. And it's unheard of for Namibians, the way they explain to them 4 or 5 hours without power daily is nothing new. It's just part of their life.
Yes, yes, it's part of their lives, and we can just not imagine the same situation happening in Namibia, because that means business and economic activities are slowed down. Imagine if you were in a business setup and you were supposed to produce a certain amount of goods, for example. So your business operations are being disrupted. That means low output, low taxes for businesses that are paying to the government. So it's just a huge disruption that can take South Africa to ICU.
South Africa is in the ICU. Let's hope they get out of it. Yes, one of the very few things that Namibians take for granted and should be grateful for, a steady supply of power. But you've mentioned producers, etc. Just now, we have a report by Reuters showing how farmers in South Africa are suffering due to load shedding.
Sprinklers stand motionless in Carl Gorgon's fields. The Cape Town vegetable farmer has abandoned growing on half of his land, as he cannot irrigate as frequently as needed. That's because South Africa is in the grip of its worst power cuts on record, known locally as load shedding.
If load shedding keeps continuing, I think in this area, we'll lose our livelihoods. It's impossible to farm like this. To farm half the amount of seedlings in season when you're supplying supermarkets, I might as well stop, close the doors and stop the business.
Utility Eskom, for years plagued by corruption and mismanagement, has been implementing increasingly intense rolling blackouts. That's hamstrung growth in sub-Saharan Africa's most industrialized economy. But help could be on its way. Next month, South Africa's government is expected to lay out plans to take on between 1 and 2/3 of Eskom's more than $23 billion worth of debt. But that process could take a long time. Eskom anticipates the power outages will continue for 2 more years at least. Fruit farmer Haney de Toit grows apples and pears destined for foreign markets. Only premier grades are shipped to the European Union, UK, China and the Middle East. But if his crop gets too little water, that affects size and quality.
2 or 3 cycles, the tree have a certain need for water, and you need a certain amount of hours in a week from Monday to Sunday. And with phase 3 to 6 load shedding, it's impossible.
10% reduction in exports from his farm equates to $435,600 in lost revenue. And the power outages are just the latest setback, following drought, the global health crisis, and higher costs due to the war in Ukraine. Dutoit says some farmers tell him they can't go on, and that they've got to make a call whether or not to leave their farms.
We talked about it earlier in the program, Philippus, the International Monetary Fund, which yesterday released its global growth figures, economic growth figures for this year and 2024. Unfortunately, no indication yet of what they expect for Namibia. That will be reflected in their regional report. But interesting news in their crystal ball.
Yeah, interesting news because, I mean, we are living in a world of globalization. So whatever is happening in the world obviously will impact us. And we know we depend on, tourism is one of our key sectors. So if the global economy is expected to slow down, we can, let's say we can expect a slowdown in tourism activities as well, which will have a negative impact on Namibia. Indeed, some of the factors that the IMF listed as risks, the war in Ukraine, obviously, inflation, also the whole issue around geopolitical tensions, which is escalating globally. But the IMF compiled a short report with their data, so we're going to play out with that. From me, Jo Marie Duddy, thank you very much. We'll be back next week. Philippus, last word from you. I hope you enjoyed the show and see you next time.